Hey everybody, this is Aaron from Wise Podcast, and this is our first ever personal review of our last podcast. And Alexander and I have talked about doing something like this in the past, and this week is the first time we were actually doing it. So this is our personal look back at the last episode and our takeaways from it, and anything that we felt we didn't say or wanted to say or forgot to say or any reflection we've had on the past episode. This is where we can lay it down for you guys. So, of course, everybody knows that our last episode was the episode on the Just Philosophy's take on manifestation. And, of course, this is a little bit different than the traditional way of thinking about manifestation in the modern times. And so things like The Secret or Abraham Hicks even, they all have their way of talking about manifestation. And I think if you guys listen to that episode, you get the sense of what my idea was of the term manifestation and where I was coming from. And it was coming from the spiritual community, because that's the path that I took from conspiracy to spirituality. And then I, came across Alexander, and, the rest is history. But so I do have that history with the spiritual community, and I guess my idea of what manifestation means to most people nowadays is that it's something that people think that they can do. They can create something with their thoughts or with their words or with their ideas almost instantly. And that was what I was trying to get across in this episode, was all of the frustration I've seen being in some of these groups and seeing people discuss these ideas of manifestation and how they are trying to manifest something that they want or need, as fast as possible. And when it doesn't happen for them as fast as they need it to, that's when I see the frustration. And so I guess from my experience, it seemed like people, the general majority of people thought that manifestation was something kind of woo-woo, but in the spiritual community, something that people could do, or the idea was that they could do, they could change their world almost instantly. And so I was bringing that to the table, and after listening to that episode a few times, I actually think that maybe I misrepresented the majority of people out there. And I thought about how I use the term manifestation, and I talked to a few other people and how they use it. And I may have been wrong saying like the majority of people think that it's something instantaneous that can happen. And because I even looked at myself and how I use the term, and I use it a lot, saying to explain how something came to be. And I'm not even talking about like someone created it or I created it, but that this was the result of something manifesting, or kind of explaining that the result of all these things happening was this, and that's how this manifested in that sort of fashion. So I may have been wrong in saying or thinking that a lot of people think that it is by definition something that happens instantaneously. But I did think it was important for me to point out that example that I gave with that guy who was overweight and he wanted to become fit, and so he had an intention and he had consistency of effort, and through his consistency of effort and determination, willpower, if you will, he was able to make that happen. And a lot of people, were I don't want to say jealous, but they wanted the same thing to happen. But I get the sense that they, I don't know if they thought that they could just think that, their weight loss could just happen without doing anything, without getting off the couch. I don't know. So I guess my frustration with seeing other people's frustration is that there is sort of a disconnect in these communities that I felt doing this episode. Hopefully it can eventually, branch out and reach these people, and hopefully they're open-minded enough to think about and look more into what we're saying, and maybe look into more of the human design stuff. So, they can see that there is this other side where only 8 to 9% of people out there have the ability to speak it into manifesting. No, I don't want to say almost instantly, because it's not like a bag of gold just drops out of the air, but through like synchronicities, I guess is how I would explain it. But I did like what Alexander said in the episode was about holding that vibration of that thing that you're intending to manifest, holding that, and some people need to hold that longer than others. So I do think that is really important to say, and then also making sure that you're not in want. Because again, when you're in want, like we talked about in the episode where I was trying to sell my house last September, and I was in that want. I wanted to sell that house. I was almost in desperation where I needed to sell the house. And ultimately, it didn't work out at that time. So remember that to truly be in that vibration, to manifest these things or to make it pure, you can't have preferences. So in a way, manifestation is almost more on the trust side than it is on the willpower side, because you're more or less saying that I have the intention to do this, but I'm not tied to the outcome. And like Alexander also said in that episode, that our needs and our wants are most likely always different. And I don't like to use an absolute there, but it's almost always different, what we think we need and what we really want, or sorry, I guess you could say what we think we need, which is kind of what we want, and what the universe thinks we need and what it gives us tend to be two different things, even if it's just slightly different. So I did like the thing about holding vibration, no preferences. Just looking at some of my notes here that I jotted down and listening to the last couple times. And I do think that thinking about when you are making that intention or that manifestation, if you hold the overall good for everyone involved, if you hold that in your intention, I think that really helps to make sure that there's no preferences there. Because when you have a preference, then you are essentially holding your own, your own good over everybody else, because it's, for your bias. And so if you are holding the overall good for everybody involved in the idea of your intention, then I think that helps you to not have preferences. And so going back to that episode about my house, Alexander did bring up holding the overall good for everyone involved in my intention, because in that aspect, that would change my intention of selling the house. Because I would say, okay, well, the person trying to buy it, if it ultimately comes out that, they're not financially able to do that, I don't want to burden them with this payment for the rest of their lives if they can't do it. So let's only have this happen. Let me only sell my house to somebody who's able to pay for it and wants it and all that. So I hope that example helps to clarify a lot of that. And a few other things here. I also wanted to say that, yes, that everything does have a cost. And we did talk about that. But, the more I think about this, the more it makes sense. Everything does have a cost. So if you are wanting something to happen extremely fast, there's going to be, like Alexander says, there's a cost for everything. But let me bring an example. A lot of people, and myself included in the past, when I've struck up a liking for another person, and I've wanted to enter into some sort of like romantic relationship with that person, I always have a tendency in the past, before I was introduced to this philosophy, because I'd like to think that I would do it differently if that opportunity ever arisen in the future. But I would always like have this want to jump into a relationship and to like do everything to know that person almost instantly, to rush that. And I've done that in the past. And I even wanted to start a band at one point in my life called Rushed and Ruined, which is funny, but it has to do with this type of thing. But you can clearly see the cost in that. Rushing into a relationship, you're losing out on taking the time to know somebody the right way, taking that time to learn the intricate parts of that person, into just giving into your energetic desires. And again, I think that a lot of that has to do with my makeup in the human design as a person, and even, you know, just astrologically, the influences that I have in my life that make me want to do that. And I don't think everybody has the desire to do that. I think some people are more patient than others, but you miss out on a lot, and that's essentially the cost. And of course, you've heard the term, there's no such thing as a free lunch, because there is a cost to having that free lunch. Because if a friend took you out to lunch, then the cost is that time, is what you could have had if you didn't go out with that friend, whether that's a different lunch, or maybe you could have got more work done. So there's always a cost to everything, and it all comes down to perspective. So just knowing that, and like Alexander says in this most recent episode, that the cost isn't negative, it's just a necessity. It's just something that happens, and you can't get around that. So I really hope that this episode just kind of opened the minds of a lot of people out there into the idea that not everybody can manifest the same way. I think that was my ultimate goal, and it is a perspective that I've taken on, and I like to alter other people's perspectives, or give them something to consider around this same topic. Like if somebody's pushing veganism, I like to mention that, well, you know, in the blood type diet, O blood types need to have red meat. And I think that's why some people, they can't prosper on a vegan diet for that long. They just get really thin and kind of emaciated and have no energy. And I think it's because we are all different, and one thing just doesn't work for everybody, because we're all different. And again, I think we need to celebrate those differences, that uniqueness of each individual person. And I would like to say that goes to say that our gender, our race, where we came from, the things that we like, all these things should be celebrated each individually for that specific person. So we don't need to have these labels and be like, oh, you know, women versus men, or black versus white, because it's always a gray area. Like, everybody is gray. If you think about it, everybody's made up of different shades of different things. And so when you think about it, everybody's gray. And I guess that's a good slogan to maybe talk about in the future. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this reflection, and hopefully Alexander will do his, and we'll be able to have both of those up there for everybody to listen to. But thank you again for listening to the Wise podcast and the manifestation episode, and I would love to hear other people's feedback on this episode and their takeaways and their reflections of it, and to see if what I thought was communicated through the podcast, if it is what other people comprehended. So thanks a lot, appreciate it. See you soon. Let's journey.